Greyzone Warfare released recently and we gave it a try.
Apparently I'm strong or something.
I got one shot!
Are you dead then, or?
Shot! I think they hit me in the heart.
Stay still.
Oh, you can bandage me! Please, sir. Can you help me?
There's
Oh,
one here to
another
the
one.
left.
I'm dead.
There's enemies in this area then.
Yeah.
They're right next to my body somewhere. I can hear them walking, but there's also a bot. There's two of them.
Jerry James. Okay, this is players. Because they instantly killed me. Don't forget to do the sneak.
Oh, they're looting on our bodies. One dead. Nice.
So Greyzone Warfare is an extraction shooter game. Deploy in, complete missions, loot gear and items, fight some bots, maybe fight some players, extract, and progress. I'm coming more from Call of Duty DMZ and have never played Tarkov, so I probably have a different perspective on this game compared to a lot of other people. Greyzone is described on Steam as an intense tactical FPS emphasizing realism. One of the reasons why I prefer to play the COD style games rather than Tarkov is that the realism is never fully realistic and it makes for incredibly tedious gameplay. That's not to say that COD is a perfect example of an FPS. It's certainly not, and it's gone in the wrong direction for a while now. I prefer the older style COD games that have an element of realism, like you're a normal soldier, but with the arcade style gunplay. Now, since COD DMZ dropped support, I've been looking for an extraction shooter that's more casual, arcadey and fun than the realism style of Tarkov, but also more mature than COD as well. The major issues I had with DMZ was that it was too easy to gear, the lack of content and support for the game, there's no risk when you take a fight with players, and there's a ton of issues with missions, bugs. So back to Greyzone. This probably falls more towards the realism side than I would like, but so far it's not been that bad to deal with, and it's not like there's a huge amount of choice with extraction shooters at the moment. So having played this for a good few hours so far, I'm going to do a simple pro and con list so that you can decide if this is something you're interested in playing. Let's start off with an easy one. The game is in early access, but has hundreds of missions for you to do. There should be plenty to keep you occupied as you explore this world. Having spent a fair few hours in just the starting town, the map seems massive right now. There's a lot of space to explore, and the in-game map doesn't show you all the buildings, so there's more than it looks. This point, however, does come with a downside. There's a lot of open space in the map, which is effectively just filler between points of interest, and this doesn't make the best map design. However, again, as it's in early access, they might add more to these spaces in the future, otherwise it's just going to be running simulator while you spend 10 minutes running to the next point of interest. This is something I suggested as a development for DMZ. It feels far more immersive to have a base camp where you gear up, get your quests, put on all of your equipment, and then fly out to wherever you need to go to on the map. This point alone makes the world feel far more alive. There's lots of people in the session you're in. It also makes it feel far more dangerous because there's going to be enemy players doing the same thing. It also adds a little bit of an MMO aspect to it, which I personally like. There's not much to elaborate on this one. The guns feel decent to shoot and they have a good amount of recoil, but controllable too. I think this point is very important in an FPS game because you're shooting almost all the time. I imagine there'll probably be more gun variety as I progress through the game as well. I'd like to get a sniper, for example. One point I would like to make though is that the iron sights are terrible. I'm struggling to see what is going on because they're so far away and they're tiny in the middle of my screen. Inventory is one of the things I was concerned about when trying this game. It's slow to loot, which isn't a bad thing, as it adds an element of risk, and I keep running out of inventory space too. One thing that's really annoying is that you can't swap items in your bag, but this is something I think should be changed. Other than this though, inventory management is largely fine. For healing, once you know what you need to use, it's largely fine, but having some indicators or some description in the item, or when you hover over your wound it tells you what to use, that would have been really helpful, as I wasn't sure whether I needed a bandage, a splint, or one of those medical kits. But let's address the elephant in the room. The number one complaint that people are having is regarding FPS and lag. I've lumped these two together because for us it was hard to tell if the low FPS was causing some stutter or if it was the server lagging. This one really needs looking at. My FPS is really low for my hardware, but the game was playable, although not a smooth experience. This is probably the number one issue that they need to fix. The servers, however, were extremely laggy when we first started. We were often rubber banding all over the place. This is a really common launch thing that no games seem to get right. With that said though, towards the end of the night they were absolutely fine, so we will have to see with this one. So friendly fire is enabled in this game. I'm okay with this. I've played a lot of hardcore in COD, I'm used to it, I quite like it as a mechanic. But there doesn't seem to be any punishment for team killing. That needs to change, because killing people on your own faction or your own team and stealing their loot might be a thing. Additionally, with the lag, it's very annoying to hit a teammate by accident when you think you were shooting over their shoulder. So this point, along with the previous one about friendly fire, makes it very easy to shoot your own faction by accident. We need some sort of system. I think in Tarkov there are armbands that you can wear with specific colours so you can identify teammates. I think this game needs a similar system here, as currently everybody is wearing the same gear. Perhaps instead of armbands, coloured helmets would be good, although my personal preference would just be to have a UI indicator for those in your squad, and then perhaps a dot above the heads of friendly faction players or at their feet, something similar. This one was a bit of a gripe of mine while playing. Sometimes when I died I got insta-killed, a shot to the heart or whatever, which makes sense. However, when killing the bots, it took a lot of bullets, and you can see the shots hitting as the blood is coming off them. Most of the time it would one-shot to the head, but if you shot them in the chest or something similar, that would not one-shot them. Now, this again might be lag, it might be bad hit registration, wonky hitboxes, or perhaps even the gun sights not working correctly, or even the bullet damage not working correctly. Despite those possibilities though, this feels bad when you're playing. This is a really good example of where realism gets in the way of a game being fun to play. Okay, so there's a couple of other points here that aren't really pros or cons. The first thing is the attachment system is really complicated. I don't live in America, I don't have any familiarity with guns, I don't understand the attachment system as it is currently. There isn't enough descriptive language or UI prompts to show me what gun is compatible with what attachment, what a rail even is. I learnt last night that a rail is required for an optic, but I don't know what rail is required for example, the AKM, and then what optic fits on that rail. So I had no idea. So I ended up just using iron sights because it's too complex. This is something I'm willing to learn, but having in-game prompts to learn it would be far better than having to go externally to like a wiki or something similar. Another point I haven't addressed yet is the faction system. I like the idea of the faction system, the fact that you align yourself to a certain faction. I hate the idea that if your friend doesn't pick the same faction, you can't play with them. And one of the most important points here is you can't change your faction once you've selected it unless they wipe the server. That's really bad game design. If this isn't addressed, this will cause a major issue where two people or a group of people will sign up to the game and choose different factions and then realize they can't play together. It makes sense from a gameplay and lore perspective, but there needs to be some way of either changing it, resetting it without losing progress. Maybe having different characters, and you can have one character in each faction, and then you can do separate progression for each one. That would be a good way around it. It would probably get people to play more often because you could have a solo account, you could have one you play with one set of friends, one you play with another set of friends, or in a different server or something like that. That might work well, but this really needs to be addressed. Another point here is part of an extraction shooter is looting. When we were playing, there was barely any loot. There was the odd food item and things that were required for gameplay because you have to eat and drink. The problem with this is it doesn't feel like much of an extraction shooter. You don't build up your stash back at your base that you can then sell and buy better equipment with, that sort of thing, or even find better equipment in the field. Again, this may change as I progress through the game. On a positive note for this one though, there's no pointless loot. You don't run around collecting 25 screwdrivers, 6 bandages for no reason. Yes, I'm looking at you, COD DMC, for that specific one, although then they did add passives which made them have purpose. I'm not sure where they need to go with this one, but it doesn't feel like an extraction shooter if there's no loot. My final point here is that the studio is quick to respond and doing hotfix. Whilst we were playing last night, I could see that the developers were posting in Discord acknowledging that people were spawning in without a head, which was quite a funny bug, and they actually released a hotfix on the same night as well. I know the developers are based in Europe, and the time of the patch was near midnight their time. So it was nice to see that the studio was quick to respond and fix some issues. So, as a conclusion then, I like the game. There's a couple of elements that I find too complex for someone new to the realism shooter genre, without enough in-game hints to direct me. There's also a few things that need to be addressed to make the game more enjoyable to play. And then there's the major issue, the low FPS and the server lag, which I've already addressed, and that's what they need to focus on for that game to be successful. Overall, this game has some potential, and we will see how well they support it and what direction it takes. As for me, I will continue playing this game, and since there's progression and missions in this game, I'll likely make some videos on how to do the missions similar to how I did for DMZ. So subscribe if you're interested, and I'll catch you in the next one.